I used to drive for Food Dash during college. Money was tight, and between rent and textbooks, I was barely scraping by. My roommates could afford to party every weekend while I was out hustling for tips. It was approaching midnight on a Tuesday, but the late night shift paid better, and I needed every dollar I could get. I had just picked up an order from a 24-hour diner downtown. 2 burgers, fries, and a milkshake. The delivery address was way out in the industrial district, about 30 minutes from the restaurant. Most drivers avoided that area after dark, but that meant fewer competitors and higher surge pricing for me. The GPS led me through increasingly empty streets. Streetlights became sparse, then disappeared entirely. I passed abandoned warehouses and empty lots filled with weeds. The roads here were poorly maintained, full of potholes that made my old Honda rattle with every bump. Eventually, I turned into what looked like a business park that had seen better days. Half the buildings were boarded up. The address led me to a small office building at the very end of the complex. Every window was dark, except for one dim light on the second floor. I parked directly under the only working streetlight in the entire lot. The building looked like it had been empty for years. Paint was peeling from the walls, and several ground floor windows were cracked. I checked the address 3 times on my phone. This had to be wrong. I opened the app and messaged the customer. "Hi, I'm outside the building, but it looks closed. Can you confirm the address?" The response came immediately. "Yes, that's right. I'm working late. 2nd floor, suite 2B. Just come up." Something felt off. The building had no signage, no company names, nothing to indicate any business operated here. But the customer seemed certain, and I needed the money. I grabbed the food and my phone, using its flashlight to navigate toward what looked like an entrance. The front door was propped open with a brick. Inside, the lobby was completely dark except for my phone's light. The floor was covered with dust and debris. An old directory on the wall was too faded to read. I found a staircase and climbed to the 2nd floor. The hallway stretched into darkness in both directions. Most of the suite numbers had fallen off the doors. I walked slowly, checking each door until I found one with 2B still visible. The door was slightly ajar. I knocked softly. "Food delivery." "Come in," a voice called from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped into complete blackness. My phone's flashlight revealed an empty office space. No furniture, no equipment, nothing. Just bare walls and dirty carpet. "Hello?" I called out. "Over here," the voice said, but it seemed to come from a different direction now. I swept my flashlight around the room. It was definitely empty. The voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing there. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice starting to shake. "Right behind you." I spun around, and my light caught a figure standing just a few feet away. A man wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I had not heard him approach. "Here's your food," I said quickly, extending the bag toward him. He did not take it. Instead, he just stood there, staring at me. In the weak light from my phone, I could not make out his features clearly, but something about his posture made my skin crawl. "You can just set it down," he said. I placed the bag on the floor and started backing toward the door. "The total is $23.50. You can tip through the app." "Actually," he said, "I think you should stay a while." That was when I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me. Multiple sets of footsteps, getting closer. I turned toward the door and saw shadows moving in the corridor. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I should go." "No mistake," the man said. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." I bolted for the door, but someone was already standing in the doorway. Another figure, bigger than the first, blocking my exit. I could hear more movement in the hallway now. At least 3 or 4 people, maybe more. "Please," I said, "I just want to leave. You can keep the food." "We don't want the food," the man behind me said. "We want what you have in your pockets." "I don't have much cash," I said. "Well, maybe $40. "We'll take whatever you have." The figure in the doorway stepped into the room, and I could see he was holding something in his hand. It was too dark to tell what, but the way he held it made me think it was a weapon. "Phone, wallet, keys," the first man said. "Everything." My hands were shaking as I reached into my pockets. I pulled out my wallet and placed it on the floor next to the food bag. Then my keys. When I hesitated with my phone, the man in the doorway stepped closer. "The phone too." I set it down, and immediately the room plunged into complete darkness. I could hear them moving around me, but I could not see anything. Someone grabbed my arm, and I tried to pull away, but another set of hands grabbed me from the other side. "Stay still," one of them said. I felt them going through my pockets, taking everything. My work badge, the few dollar bills I had left, even the pen I kept clipped to my shirt. They were thorough. "Is that everything?" one of them asked. "Check the car," another voice said. "No," I said quickly. "I gave you everything. Please just let me go." But they were already dragging me toward the door. I stumbled in the darkness, unable to see where they were taking me. We went down the stairs and out into the parking lot. Under the streetlight, I could finally see them clearly. 4 men all wearing dark clothes and baseball caps. They looked young, maybe college age like me. One of them was going through my car with a small flashlight, checking the glove compartment and center console. "Just some napkins and car registration," he called out. "Good enough," one of the others said. They let go of my arms, and I thought for a moment they might actually let me leave. But then one of them pointed down the street. "Start walking," he said. "Don't look back. Don't call anyone for at least an hour. We'll be watching." "What about my car?" "You can come back for it tomorrow." I wanted to argue, but 4 against 1 were not good odds, especially when I did not know if any of them were armed. I started walking down the dark street, away from my car and away from them. It took me almost 2 hours to walk to a gas station that was still open. The clerk let me use the phone to call my roommate, who came to pick me up. We drove back to get my car, but when we arrived, all 4 tires had been slashed. The police took a report, but there was not much they could do. The building had no security cameras, and I had not gotten a clear look at any of the men's faces. The customer account had been created with fake information and a prepaid phone number that was already disconnected. I filed an insurance claim for the tires, but I lost everything else: my phone, my wallet, the cash I had earned that night. Worst of all, I lost the sense of safety I used to have driving around the city. I stopped doing food delivery after that. The money was not worth the risk. Sometimes I still think about that empty office building and wonder how many other drivers they lured there before someone finally caught them. I hope I was the last one. I was 21 when this happened, working as a driver for Pizza Palace in Bloomington, Indiana. For those who do not know, Bloomington is home to Indiana University, which transforms this otherwise quiet Midwestern town into a bustling college hub during the academic year. I had been delivering pizzas for about 8 months at that point. The job paid decent money, especially with tips from hungry students who ordered late into the night. My usual shift ran from 6 in the evening until 3 in the morning on weekends, which meant I saw the town at its wildest and most unpredictable. This particular incident occurred on a Friday night in early March. Spring break was approaching, so the campus was still packed with students, trying to squeeze in one last weekend of partying before heading home. The weather had been unusually warm for March, which meant more people were out walking around than typical for that time of year. It was around 2:30 in the morning when the order came in. I remember checking the clock because I was hoping my shift would end without any more deliveries. The order was for 2 large pizzas and some breadsticks, going to an address on the east side of town in one of the older residential neighborhoods, where many students rented houses. I loaded the pizzas into my insulated bag and headed out in my beat-up Honda Civic. The drive should have taken about 15 minutes, but I got stuck behind a slow-moving car for most of the way. When I finally reached the address, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The house was a typical student rental, a 2-story place with peeling paint and a front porch cluttered with old furniture and empty bottles. Most of the windows were dark, but I could see a faint light coming from what looked like the living room. I parked on the street directly in front of the house and grabbed the pizzas. As I walked up the cracked sidewalk toward the front door, I noticed how quiet the neighborhood was. Most college areas are still pretty active at 3 in the morning, but this street felt completely dead. I knocked on the front door and waited. No response. I knocked again, louder this time, and called out that I had their pizza delivery. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number from the order receipt. The phone rang several times before someone answered with a groggy voice. I explained that I was outside with their pizza order, and the person on the other end sounded confused. He said he had not ordered any pizza and had been asleep for hours. When I read him the address, he confirmed it was correct, but insisted he had not placed any order. I was about to hang up and head back to the store when I heard a car door slam somewhere behind me. I turned around and saw a dark sedan parked about 3 houses down on the opposite side of the street. I had not noticed it when I arrived, which struck me as odd since I always check for other cars when I park. The person on the phone was still talking, asking if maybe one of his roommates had ordered the pizza. I told him to check with them and hung up. As I stood there waiting, I kept glancing toward the dark sedan. I could not see anyone inside it, but something about its placement felt wrong. After a few minutes, the guy came back to the door. He said none of his roommates had ordered pizza either, and they were all confused about why someone would use their address. He seemed genuinely sorry about the mix-up and offered to pay for the pizzas anyway. But company policy prevented me from accepting money for orders that were not actually placed. I told him not to worry about it and started walking back toward my car. That was when I noticed the sedan had moved. It was now parked just 2 houses away, still on the opposite side of the street, but noticeably closer to where I had parked. My heart started beating faster as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe someone had just come home and happened to park near where I was delivering. But the timing felt too coincidental, especially given the fake pizza order that had brought me to this specific location. I reached my car and put the pizzas in the back seat, all while keeping an eye on the sedan. The streetlights were dim, and I could not make out any details about the vehicle or see if anyone was inside. I decided to get out of there as quickly as possible. As I started my engine, the sedan's headlights suddenly turned on. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized someone had definitely been sitting in that car, watching me the entire time. I put my car in drive and pulled away from the curb, checking my rearview mirror constantly. The sedan pulled out behind me almost immediately. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe whoever was driving lived in the same direction I was heading. But as I made several turns to test my theory, the sedan followed every single one. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I was being followed, and I had no idea why. The fake pizza order had clearly been a setup to get me to that specific location at that specific time. But for what purpose? I decided to drive toward the main commercial strip, where there would be more lights and possibly other people around, even at 3 in the morning. As I accelerated, the sedan sped up to match my pace. When I slowed down to see what would happen, it slowed down too, always maintaining the same distance behind me. I pulled out my phone and called the pizza store. My manager answered, and I quickly explained what was happening. He told me to drive straight to the nearest police station and not to worry about bringing the pizzas back to the store. The police station was about 10 minutes away, but those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. The sedan continued following me, never getting too close, but never falling back either. It felt like a predator, stalking its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. When I finally pulled into the police station parking lot, I expected the sedan to drive past and disappear. Instead, it stopped at the edge of the parking lot and sat there with its engine running. I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, but the distance and darkness made it impossible to identify any details. I ran inside the police station and explained the situation to the officer at the front desk. He took down my information and said he would send someone out to check on the vehicle. By the time we walked back outside, the sedan was gone. The officer told me these types of incidents were more common than people realized, especially in college towns where delivery drivers were often seen as easy targets. He advised me to always let someone at work know my exact location when making deliveries, and to trust my instincts if something felt wrong. I drove home that night taking a completely different route than usual, constantly checking my mirrors to make sure I was not being followed. I never found out who was in that sedan or what they had planned for me. The fake pizza order was paid for with a stolen credit card, so there was no way to trace it back to whoever placed it. I kept working at Pizza Palace for another few months, but I never took another late-night delivery alone. The experience taught me that predators often use seemingly innocent situations to isolate their victims. Now, years later, I still think about that night whenever I see a delivery driver working alone in the dark. Sometimes the most terrifying encounters are the ones where nothing actually happens, because you are left wondering what might have been. Before I begin this story, I want to mention that what happened to me changed how I approach my job completely. Some experiences stick with you no matter how much time passes. I was working for a Chinese restaurant called Golden Dragon. It was a Tuesday night in late October, around 2015. I had been doing deliveries for about 6 months, and I thought I had seen everything. My manager, Lisa, handed me the final order of the night: 3 containers of lo mein and some egg rolls. The address was written on a small piece of paper in her handwriting. The customer had paid by credit card over the phone, so I just needed to deliver the food and get a signature. The address was way out on the edge of town, past the industrial district. I had my smartphone with GPS, but the signal got weaker as I drove further from the city center. The street name was Maple Creek Lane, and the house number was 847. As I drove, the streetlights became fewer and fewer. Eventually, I was driving through complete darkness except for my headlights. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, and then the gravel got thinner until it was barely a path. I almost missed the driveway completely. There was no mailbox, just a rusted metal sign with the numbers 847 barely visible in the paint. The driveway was longer than I expected, winding through tall trees that blocked out any moonlight. When I finally reached the house, I sat in my car for a moment, looking at it. The place looked like it had been abandoned for years. The siding was falling off in places, and several windows were boarded up. But there was a dim light coming from what looked like the front room. I grabbed the food from the passenger seat and walked to the front door. There was no doorbell, so I knocked 3 times. The sound echoed strangely, like the house was mostly empty inside. I heard movement from inside, but no one came to the door. I waited about 30 seconds and knocked again. This time, I heard a voice from somewhere deep in the house. "Come around to the back door," the voice called out. It was a woman's voice, but it sounded strained, like she was sick or had been crying. I walked around the side of the house, using my phone's flashlight to avoid tripping over the broken concrete steps and scattered debris in the yard. The back door was standing wide open, and I could see into what looked like a kitchen. "Hello?" I called out as I approached the doorway. "I have your delivery from Golden Dragon." "Just bring it inside and set it on the counter," the woman's voice replied. She sounded like she was in another room, maybe upstairs. Every instinct told me not to go inside, but I'd been trained to be accommodating to customers. I stepped through the doorway and immediately noticed the smell. It was like spoiled meat mixed with something chemical, maybe cleaning supplies. The kitchen was in terrible condition. The wallpaper was peeling, and there were stains on the floor that looked like they had been there for months. I set the food containers on the counter next to a pile of dirty dishes. "Ma'am, I need you to sign the receipt," I called out. "I will be down in just a moment," she replied. Her voice seemed to be coming from directly above me now. I waited, looking around the kitchen. On the table, there were several prescription pill bottles, all empty. Next to them was a stack of mail that looked like it had been piling up for weeks. That was when I heard the second voice. It was a man's voice, very quiet, almost whispering. At first, I thought he was talking to the woman upstairs, but then I realized the voice was coming from somewhere else in the house. I could not make out what he was saying, but the tone was urgent, like he was trying to warn someone about something. "Ma'am," I called out again, louder this time. "I really need to get going. Can you come sign for this?" The whispering stopped immediately. The house became completely silent. Even the woman upstairs had stopped moving around. I decided to leave the food and go. As I turned toward the back door, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Someone was standing in the doorway that led from the kitchen to the rest of the house. It was a man, tall and thin, wearing clothes that looked like they had not been washed in weeks. But what really disturbed me was his face. He was smiling, but it was not a normal smile. His mouth was open too wide, and he was not blinking. "Thank you for bringing our dinner," he said in that same whisper I had heard before. "We have been so hungry." I did not respond. I just started walking toward the back door, trying not to make any sudden movements. But as I got closer to the exit, I heard footsteps on the stairs. The woman was finally coming down. "Where are you going?" she called out, and her voice sounded completely different now. Before, she had sounded weak and sick. Now she sounded angry, almost threatening. I reached the back door and turned around to look back into the kitchen. The man was still standing in the doorway, still smiling that horrible smile. And now I could see the woman at the bottom of the stairs. She was wearing a dirty white dress, and her hair was hanging in front of her face. "We paid for that food," she said, taking a step into the kitchen. "You cannot just leave." But I had already stepped outside. I walked quickly around the house back to my car, listening for any sounds of them following me. I heard the back door slam shut, and then I heard voices inside the house, but I could not tell what they were saying. I got in my car and started the engine. As I backed down the long driveway, I kept checking my mirrors to see if anyone was coming after me. When I finally reached the main road, I realized I was shaking. I drove straight back to the restaurant and told Lisa what had happened. She looked up the order in the computer and frowned. "That is strange," she said. "The credit card was declined. The transaction never went through." We tried calling the phone number from the order, but it just rang and rang. No answering machine, no voicemail. The next day, Lisa called the police to report the incident. 2 officers drove out to Maple Creek Lane to check on the house. When they came back, they told us that 847 Maple Creek Lane had been empty for over 2 years. The previous owners had moved out after a family member died in the house, and it had been on the market ever since. I still work in food delivery, but I have strict rules now. I never go inside anyone's house, no matter what they ask. I do not deliver to addresses that seem suspicious, and I always trust my instincts when something feels wrong. Sometimes I still think about that night. I wonder who those people were and what they really wanted. The food containers I left behind were probably still sitting on that kitchen counter when the police went to check the house. I have driven past the turn for Maple Creek Lane a few times since then, but I have never gone back down that road. Some places are better left alone.